Hi guys, welcome back. So this is going to be our first introduction to the book that I'll be reading aloud, which is some 7th graders are reading them. 8th grade, if you want to tune in and follow along, that's absolutely fine. Other 7th grade who aren't reading this, you can also follow along. Why not? So the book we're reading is called The Call of the Wild by Jack London. Oops. All right. If you don't have your book at home with you, pause this video now and look up online a free version. There's multiple out there. I just typed in the title of the book. I don't know if you can see that. The Call of the Wild. I hope that's not backwards. By Jack London. And look for a free version. And that way you can follow along. If you just want to listen and not look at a book while we do it, that's fine. The choice is yours. Before we get into chapter 1, I just want to go over some background info. Now I feel like I shouldn't write on this because it looks like it shows up backwards. I'll have to figure that out. So I'll be right back and I will give you some background info on the book before we dive right into it. All right, be back soon. All right, back again. So it turns out this isn't bad. It's interesting. When I look at my camera right now, these words look like they're written backwards. But when I hit play and rewatch the video, it looks like it reads forward for you guys. So right now we're going to get into some background information for The Call of the Wild, and there are two major overarching pieces of information from history that will be kind of used throughout this story. One is about the Alaska dog mushing and the history of it, and the other is about the California Gold Rush. Now, being from California, I learned all about the California Gold Rush. Now, I don't know how much you guys have learned about it, but we're just going to read 2 brief articles covering each topic and then get into the book just so you have some background knowledge. I'll be back in a minute. All right, we are back at it again. So the first article we are going to be reading is about it's an intro to Alaska dog mushing history. I'm going to flip this around so we can read this article together. I want you to be able to see it while I read it. All right, here we go. An intro to Alaska dog mushing history. When Russian and then American pioneers moved into the Alaska frontier, they found a culture already greatly shaped and supported by its interaction with dogs. Alfred H. Brooks, the head of the U.S. Geological Survey, and for whom the Brooks Range is named, wrote at the beginning of the 20th century, countless generations of Alaskan natives have used the dog for transport, and he is to Alaska what the yak is to India, or the llama to Peru. Before contact with the Russians in 1732, Inupiaq and Yupik peoples of the Bering Straits had already adapted their masterfully designed wood-latticed and gut-skin covered kayaks into an over-the-snow craft, minus the skin but plus ski-like runners to glide over snow when pulled by dogs. The average team was 3 dogs, with their master running ahead to guide their dogs between villages, fish camps, and hunting camps. Unlike today, teams were harnessed like a fan with no leader. With their long-distance fur-gathering forays, the Russians brought new efficiencies to dog mushing. Teams harnessed in single file or pairs were introduced, along with the concept of a lead dog that would follow voice commands and keep the team in order. Handlebars were added to sleds. Larger teams of dogs were used, with sleds sometimes carrying passengers. Demands for dogs and sleds skyrocketed exponentially with the gold rushes to Alaska in the late 19th and early 20th century. During one of the big rushes, it was said that no stray dog could be found on the streets of Seattle. having all been rounded up and shipped to Alaska. Malamutes, Huskies, and other breeds were mixed to haul freight and passengers. Unlike today's relatively small and sleek long-distance racing sled dogs, the breeds of yesteryear weighed in around 75 pounds and pulled between 100 and 150 pounds. Sled designs proliferated, with manufacturer sleds joining the ranks of toboggan-style handmade sleds. Most every sled at the turn of the 20th century was equipped with a G-pole. The G-pole was a stout pole lashed to and projecting from the front of the sled, which the sled driver could use to leverage and steer the sled. Most dog drivers still did not ride the sled, instead running besides or riding skis or a sort of early snowboard between the dog team and sled. Riding the sled runners was used only by drivers of light and fast mail and race teams. Here it looks like an image, kind of like a blueprint over here. With the replacement of the dog team for inter-village travel by the airplane, sled technology and dog breeding languished for half a century. Sprint dog racing took the forefront, and after World War II, until Joe Redington Sr. and others reintroduced the concept of long-distance sled dog travel, this time for racing purposes. Because racing loads are minimal, smaller breeds of dogs have gotten more popular. Sleds now incorporate lightweight plastics, and a design for a mid-sled seat for the musher is becoming popular. Nonetheless, dog drivers still use commands from the mid-18th century, ha, gee, to guide their teams on sleds that use century-old designs by Alaska Native people. All right, so that was a little bit about dog sledding and the history of it and some fun little facts. We're going to move on now to reading an article about the California Gold Rush. California Gold Rush, 1849. In January 1848, James Wilson Marshall discovered gold while constructing a sawmill along the American River northeast of present-day Sacramento. The discovery was reported in the San Francisco newspapers in March, but caused little stir as most did not believe the account. The spark that ignited the gold rush occurred in 1848 when Sam Brannan, a storekeeper in Sutter's Creek, brandished a bottle filled with gold dust around San Francisco, shouting, "Gold, gold, gold from American River." The residents of the city now had proof of the discovery, and the stampede to the gold fields was on. San Francisco's harbor was soon cluttered with derelict ships deserted by their crews. Workers abandoned their jobs. San Francisco's 2 newspapers were forced to close their doors as their staff were struck by gold fever. The populations of many of the coastal towns were depleted as prospectors headed to the gold fields. The New York Herald printed out news of the discovery in August 1848, and the rush for the gold accelerated into a stampede. Gold seekers traveled overland across the mountains of California. 30,000 assembled at launch points along the plains in the spring of 1849, or took the roundabout sea routes, either to Panama or around Cape Horn, and then up the Pacific coast to San Francisco. A census of San Francisco, then called Yerba Buena, in April 1847, reported the town consisted of 79 buildings, including shanties, frames houses, and adobes. By December 1849, the population had mushroomed to an estimated 100,000. The massive influx of fortune seekers Americanized the once Mexican province and assured its inclusion as a state in the Union. S. Shuffelt was one of those gold seekers. All that we know about Mr. Shuffelt is contained in a letter he wrote from the gold fields to his cousin in March 1850. We don't know if he struck it rich or whether he ever returned to his wife and home. We don't even know his first name. On May 11, 1849, he boarded the steamer Panama in New York City, along with about 200 fellow fortune hunters, risking all on a gamble in California. Behind him, he left a wife and a child in Windham, New York, near the Catskills. Mr. Shuffelt reveals his motivation when he tells his cousin that, "I have left those that I love as my own life behind and risked everything and endured many hardships to get where I want to get here. I want to make enough to live easier and do some good with before I return." These same thoughts, no doubt, inspired the majority of those who made the trek to the gold fields. They were not intending to stay, but planned to make some money and return to their origins. Mr. Sheffeld's letter was discovered at an auction in 1924 and is now part of the collection of the Library of Congress. Passage to California. On May 11, 1849, Sheffield sailed a New York harbor headed for the Isthmus of Panama, at the time a part of Colombia. Although he experienced a few days of seasickness, he describes the voyage as enjoyable. We pick up his story as he makes his way across the isthmus to the Pacific Ocean, hoping to find passage on a ship bound for San Francisco. We proceeded up the river in canoes rowed by the natives and enjoyed the scenery of howling of the monkeys and chattering of parrots very much. We pitched our tent at Gorgona, and most of our party stayed there several weeks. S. Miller and myself went on to Panama to look out for a chance to get up to San Francisco. Of our ill success, you have probably been informed, and consequently of our long stay there, and of the deaths in our party. Yes, here Mr. Crooker, J. Miller, and L. Alden yielded up their breath to God who gave it. After many delays and vexations, we at length took passage on a German ship and set sail again on our journey to the El Dorado of the West. We went south nearly to the equator, then turned west. The weather was warm, the winds light, and contrary for our course. Our ship was a slow sailer, and consequently our passage was long and tedious. One of the sailors fell from the rigging into the water, and it was known that he could not swim, so the excitement was great. Ropes, planks, and everything that could be got hold of was thrown to him. He caught a plank and got on it. A boat was lowered, and soon they had him on board again. He was much frightened, but not much hurt. We had one heavy squall of wind and rain that tore the sails and broke some of the yards in pieces, and gave us a quick step motion to keep upon our feet. But soon all was right again, and we were plowing through the gentle Pacific at the rate of 10 knots per hour. On the 85th day, we hove in sight of an object that greatly attracted our attention, and ere long the green hills of San Francisco Bay began to show their highest points, and soon we were gliding smoothly along between them, down the bay, and when the order came to let go anchor, we brought up directly in front of the city amidst a fleet of vessels of all kinds and sizes. Now there's mishap on the way to Sacramento. We took passage on a small schooner, crossed the way with a gentle breeze, and soon were winding our way up the crooked Sacramento. We soon entered Suisun Bay, and our captain not being acquainted with the channel, we ran on the ground at high tide and a stiff breeze, so that we were fast in reality. As the tide fell, our little schooner fell also on her side and filled with water. We clung to the upper side, but were so thick that as night drew and the captain thought some of us had better go on shore, some of our party went, myself among the rest. We came very near getting swamped on the water. We laid our frail bodies down to rest, and after a short nap, the watch waked us with the sad news that the tide was rising fast and would soon overflow our resting place. Some found their feet a-soak, others their blankets, and all jumped up exclaiming, "What we shall do." But we managed to keep out of the water by getting on old logs and bogs until the morning, which being Sunday and being obliged to stay there all day made it one of the most unpleasant Sabbaths I've ever spent. At night, the captain sent a boat and took us aboard at high tide at midnight. We succeeded in getting off, and after spending 1 week and getting fast several times more, we at length reached Sacramento City, to the joy of our hearts and relief of our hands. On to the gold fields. We hired an ox team to carry our baggage and started for this place then called Hangtown, from the fact that 3 persons had been hung there for stealing and attempting to murder. 10 miles from the river, we passed Sutter's Fort, an old-looking heap of buildings surrounded by a high wall of unburnt brick and situated in the midst of a pleasant, fertile plant, covered with grass and a few scattering oaks, with numerous tame cattle and mules. We walked by the wagon, and at night cooked our suppers, rolled our blankets around us, and lay down to rest on the ground, with nothing but the broad canopy of the heavens over us, and slept soundly without fear or molestation. After leaving the plains, we passed over some hills that looked dry and barren, being burnt up by the sun and long droughts that we have here. We reached this place at night on the 4th day, and in the morning found ourselves in the midst of digging, being surrounded by holes dug. We pitched our tents, shouldered our picks and shovels, and with a pan in hand sallied forth to try our fortunes at gold digging. We did not have very good success being green at mining, but by practice and observation we soon improved some and found a little of the shining metal, getting the gold. It is found along the banks of the streams and in the beds of the same, and in almost every little ravine putting into the streams, and almost from 10 to 50 feet from the beds of the bank. We sometimes have to dig several feet deep before we find any. In other places, all the dirt and clay will pay to wash, but generally the clay pays best. If there is no clay, then it is found down on the rock. All the lumps are found on the rock, and most of the fine gold. We tell when it will pay by trying the dirt with a pan. This is called prospecting here. If it will pay from 6 to 12.5 per pan full, then we go to work. Some wash with cradles, some with what is called a tom, and various other fixings. But I like the tom best of anything that I've seen. It is a box or trough about 8 or 9 feet long, some 18 inches wide, and from 5 to 6 inches high, with an iron sieve in one end punched with half-inch holes. Underneath this is placed a ripple or box with 2 ripples across it. The tom is then placed in an oblique position. The water is brought on by the means of a hose. The dirt, stone, clay, and all is then thrown in and stirred with a nozzle until the water runs clear. The gold and final gravel goes through the sieve and falls in under the box and lodges the ripples. 3 men can wash all day without taking this out, as the water washes the loose gravel over and the gold settles in the bottom. 1 man will wash as fast as 2 can pick and shovel it in, or as fast as 3 rockers or cradles. Life in camp. There's a good deal of sin and wickedness going on here. Schaffelt lived in a cabin with 6 other miners. The cabin had windows, a fireplace, and an oven. The miners' diet was poor, with the result that many suffered from disease, particularly scurvy. Schaffelt himself fell seriously ill, became deranged, and was not expected to live, but recovered in a week's time. He describes life in camp. Many, very many that come here meet with bad success, and thousands will leave their bones here. Others will lose their health, contract diseases that they will carry to their graves with them. Some will have to beg their way home, and probably 1/2 that come here will never make enough to carry them back. But this does not alter the fact about the gold being plenty here, but shows that a poor, frail being man is, how liable to disappointment, disease, and death. There's a good deal of sin and wickedness going on here: stealing, lying, swearing, drinking, gambling, and murdering. There's a great deal of gambling carried on here. Almost every public house is a place for gambling, and this appears to be the greatest evil that prevails here. Men make and lose thousands in a night, and frequently small boys will go up and bet $5 or $10, equivalent to $115 or $225 today. And if they lose all, go the next day and dig more. We are trying to get laws here to regulate things, but it will be very difficult to get them executed. All right, guys, so those were our 2 articles about Alaska dog mushing and the California gold rush. I also, at the end, put some questions for the gold rush article. If you want to challenge yourself and try and answer them, go for it. You could post your responses in the comment section of this video and see how you do. All right. The next video, we will dive into chapter 1.